Niners fans, it's about that time. Sunday, 7 p.m. Y'all know what time it is. Faithful Niner Empire. What's good? You know who it is. It's your boy, Jay in the Bay. Once again, pleasure and an honor to be on with the best fans in the NFL, the faithful, the Niner Empire. Huge shout out to all the mothers on this special Mother's Day. Shout out to my mom. Shout out to my wife. Shout out to all the mothers out there. You guys play a pivotal role in a lot of our lives. We can't thank you enough. So this is a special broadcast on Mother's Day, and once again, huge shout out to all the mothers out there. We also This is also a special occasion because I do have a guest with me today who I will bring on shortly. But huge shout out to everyone watching Jay and the Bay on Facebook, YouTube, and Twitter. Man, we have a lot to talk about today. This is the first time me and this guest goes by the name of Rohan have linked up, and I'm excited for it. I've seen him on other channels. I've seen him on 49ers First Takes. I've seen him on, Bay Area legend Larry Krueger show. So I'm excited to have Rohan on with me today. Rohan is also a writer for 49ers Webzone, and he also co-hosts the 49ers RedZone podcast. That's the YouTube channel. So please welcome Rohan to the Jay in the Bay YouTube channel. What's good? How you doing, Rohan?
I'm doing great, man. How you doing? I mean, I'm excited to come on. Once again, thank you for letting me come on your channel. I'm appreciative of it, giving me the platform. And I mean, I'm just excited to just create some content in a way with you, talk some 49ers because post-draft, yeah, I mean, there are a lot of questions still to be answered, and the 49ers kind of made it a little more difficult, especially with the amount of depth they added. But how you doing, man?
Hey, I'm doing good, man. It's always good to talk about the 49ers. And I always welcome people that I have yet to collab with to come on. We create that relationship. Hell, we'll probably link up again in the future, closer to when the season starts, and we'll collab and pick each other's brains on 49ers topics because everyone has a different opinion about the 49ers, but that's what make things great. But for those that have yet to see you, let them know what are you currently working on? Let them know where they can find you on social media. And yeah, so let the people know.
Yeah, so my main gig is I cover the 49ers for 49ers Webzone. Over there, you can find them on Twitter, one of the biggest 49ers news sites in all of the Bay Area. So I cover the 49ers for them. Additionally, I have my own podcast, 49ers Red Zone, with my co host, Marco Martinez. We go live weekly. And like Jay said, I try and hop on a bunch of different guest podcasts, try and give my 49er intake and just more importantly see what they got to see and just have a good time. But that's my main avenues. You guys can find me on Twitter at Rohan Chakrav, RohanChakrav. But yeah, that's mainly where you can find me. You guys be sure to tune into my podcast and stuff. But yeah, make sure you subscribe to Jay as well. That's the biggest thing we're trying to get out of today. Hit that subscribe button and let's get this start rolling.
Hey man, I appreciate it. And all of Rohan's social media links are in the description below. Twitter, YouTube is both of his YouTubes. You have two YouTube channels, right?
Yeah,
Yeah.
one's the podcast and the one's my personal. Yeah.
Exactly. So make sure you check both of those out. And I have links for all his social media links in the description of this video. So make sure you check out Rohan. And I saw you on 49ers First Takes and Bay Area legend Larry Krueger. That's incredible that he welcomed you onto his show. You guys have a great rapport. I've seen your shows and I come away with learning information. So I think that's definitely a good collaboration. And Larry Krueger, I was listening to him like when I was in high school on
I
680.
know.
So that's incredible. That's cool to see that he's on YouTube. But this show is nothing without the fans, without the subscribers, without the people in the chat. So let's say what's up to the people in the chat. So we have John in the building. Hey man, it's been a minute. Glad to see you here. What's good? Appreciate you coming through to the stream tonight, John. Travis Berg Jr. What's good? Fellow content creator. He says they better sign Samuel. You already know, man. We're going to sign Deebo Samuel. Make no mistake about it. Especially, I think things are much clearer about Deebo Samuel following the completion of the draft. I think all 49ers fans, we didn't have that first round draft pick. So at least for me, I was on pins and needles just thinking, are we going to draft? Are we going to trade Debo? Are we going to keep Debo and not trade up into the first round? So I think I think we're definitely going to keep Debo. What's your read on that, Rohan? Do you think the odds are greater now after the draft that we'll sign Debo, or you still think there's a chance we could trade Debo this
Most
year?
definitely. Yeah, I do think that the odds have increased. And me personally, the week of the draft, I was of the notion that Debo Samuel was staying with the 49ers. I know a lot of people had conflicting takes. Some thought there was definitely a chance he'd be moved by the deadline. And I mean, that was a fair analysis because when you look at it, Debo Samuel's clear request was he wanted to get paid. The 49ers weren't making or coming up with his demands. And so the best way AJ Brown saw it clearly. The best way for a player to get paid is for them to get traded because as soon as they're getting traded and they're in desire to get paid, guess what? That next contract comes. AJ Brown signed his 4-year, $100 million contract, 57 million guaranteed, and 40 million guaranteed at signing. You want that money up front because that's the life-changing news, right? In a way. And so right now, Debo Samuel is under the notion where he doesn't necessarily have that big number money up front and money in his pockets. So that's why he's kind of wanting to get paid, and obviously to the value that he believes he's worth. And so I could understand the notion, but me personally, I just didn't think the 49ers would budge, especially given how they've operated in the past, right? We saw how they weren't willing to budge on Garoppolo following the shoulder surgery, and it's unknown if they're going to be willing to budge on him now because they can earn a third round compensatory pick. So that's kind of where I saw the Samuel situation. And I mean, the trade offers kind of proved that the 49ers definitely weren't going to be in consideration. I thought the day of draft night, like since there was no news coming on to 4 p.m. when draft night started, I didn't think that there was going to be a move because it's too hard to maneuver on the clock itself unless you have everything before checked out. And so that's why I thought it was unlikely. And yeah, so right now I do believe that Debo Samuel will remain a 49er and potentially even sign that long-term extension that he's been looking for this offseason.
Yeah, there's no mistake about it. Debo was, our best offensive player last year with the 49ers. He propelled us to, a playoff season and a deep run into the playoffs. Some would say we're a few plays away from advancing to the Super Bowl. But if you were John Lynch, would you have handled the Debo situation any differently? Your thoughts?
Yes, and I mean, I want to say something because a lot of people, when these negotiations happen, John Lynch, this is on you. Kyle Shanahan, this is on you. When in reality, they're not necessarily the main indicators, right, of this of why things are going wrong. It's the guys in the contract room, like Parag Marathe, the guys involved with the purely business side, and I'm sure John Lynch is involved to a fault. And so, to me, yes, I do think that at least the organization should have done something different, and this is their first slap in the face, their first big realization. They've had situations like this before with George Kittle. I think it was the Valentine's Day massacre is what his agent deemed it. Then we had one with Trent Williams last year where he almost left, and then now we have this situation, right? But this is the first time where a player has taken it to another level, gone to social media to voice his frustrations. Because in a situation where a player doesn't necessarily have much leverage, they can insert their power, which is with the voice of the people through social media to get their cause. And so for me, yeah, I would have done it differently. And here's what I'll say about the 49ers. I think they have to change the way they negotiate big time contracts. Parag Marathe is phenomenal at negotiating these low, like the mid-tier contracts, and then contracts of players on better like value deals in a way. Because we saw it this offseason with Charvarius Ward. He's got like nearly a $2 or $1 million cap hit, or sorry, not two, 3.8, I believe, $1 million cap hit for 2022. And for a player of his caliber, it's amazing how you can maneuver it that way. Only 26 million guaranteed, and it's structured in a certain way where it's beneficial for the team, more importantly. And so the way that he negotiates these contracts, I think, is very good for those contracts. However, when the gap is much more, in this case 7 to 9 million, rather than the 4 to 5 million gap you'll have with a lower tier contracts, I think that gap is a little too much. And so you have to approach those situations in a little bit of a different light because if you're that much off, that's 33% of the contract. You're definitely in a way irking the player and disrespecting them in a way. And I think they have to somewhat bridge the gap to start, because this is a negotiation. You shouldn't start with the player's demands, but you can't have that big of a gap to the point where you face the situation again.
Oh, great points, great points. And I will have a counter to that, but I gotta say
Go for it.
first, hot diggity dog. Huge shout out to Blue True. Appreciate that $10 donation to the channel. Blue True says, "Happy Sunday, Jay and Rohan. Thanks for the stream tonight." Also, another hot diggity dog. Appreciate that $5 donation. 49ers first takes. This is a good night as far as content. What's up, Jay and Rohan? Mad respect for both of you. Appreciate the kind words, man.
Same
Appreciate
here,
the kind
brother.
words. You talked about contract value and the 49ers, or specifically Parag Marate, may need to change up his approach when, signing pillars of the organization, the best players on the 49ers. I would say this: if you're in the market to buy a house, and let's say the house is 800,000, your initial offer on the house, is it going to be your best offer, or
No.
are you going to see if you can maybe get the seller to to say, hey, all right, I'll give it to you for 775 or 750? What say you?
No, you definitely don't give your best offer.
Right.
It should be in a way. I mean, we don't like to say the term because it sounds disrespectful, but it is in a way a lowball offer normally to start.
Hey, much respect, and I definitely agree to that to a certain extent. You mentioned Kittle, and especially with Fred Warner and Trent Williams. When it's a negotiation and they can get ugly, but I don't think that teams can necessarily give their best offer as their initial offer. And I think it takes time. Negotiations take time. It's not going to be
Right.
something that can just happen, in 24 hours. And I'm not saying you're saying that can be done, but Debo took this from, in a meeting room. If it depends on who you talk to. Some people believe the 49ers gave Debo an offer. Some people say they didn't. Let's be real. The 49ers, they don't have to give an offer to Debo. He's still under contract for one more season. Granted, he is deserving of a contract extension, but the 49ers, they don't necessarily have to do anything at this point. But Debo took it to another level by putting out the information on social media. And that's something that Fred Warner, George Kittle, and Trent Williams did not do. So I was definitely surprised by his actions. And I know some of the fan base were surprised and disappointed as well. But hopefully, if Debo suited up for the Niners and we've got a contract extension signed, all this, I think, will be forgotten. What do you think?
Yeah, I mean, I do think that's definitely fair, right? I mean, the fans, it's interesting because it is a little bit of a media debacle. The 49ers made sure to get in front of the story, hit up Adam Schefter the day before the trade request came through to essentially say that Debo Samuel is unwilling to come to the table. The 49ers are at the table in a way. And to me, like, at least from what I saw with the AJ Brown negotiation, from what he said, it's that the Eagles weren't willing to budge past 20 million a year. Brown would have settled for 22 million a year. And so I'm thinking it's in a very similar light with the 49ers here, where while they might have started at 17 million, they weren't willing to budge past 21 or 22. And so, or maybe I don't even think it got to 21 or 22, to be honest. I probably think they wouldn't be able to budge past like 18 to 20, somewhere around there. And to Debo Samuel, that's a little disrespectful. And to me, like, I don't think it escalated to this point after one meeting, right? I think it would have been after multiple meetings. And so the 49ers, I'm not saying that they should give up immediately to their players' needs, but as an organization, I think they just have to change a little bit in the way that they negotiate certain contracts, especially with the language that they involve in these contracts, right? Because they're not a team that's known for giving guaranteed money out, especially guaranteed money at signing. Their highest was Jimmy Garoppolo, 48.7 million, and that was out of a $137 million contract. Even Trent Williams only got 40.1 million out of his 138 million contract, and that was 20 million less than David Bakhtiari. However, when you have a player like Debo Samuel looking to get paid, am I saying that you should give out the farm for him? Not, but I'm saying that this is somewhat of a wake-up call, especially with the next negotiation on board in Nick Bosa, in that when players want their money in a way, you can't necessarily treat them with a certain amount of disrespect. Instead, there has to be constant dialogue. And so I'm not saying go full throttle, pay him 25 immediately, because then obviously the demand is going to escalate after that. But I'm saying there just needs to be a little more discourse with regards to Deebo Samuel rather than staying put at a low ball offer.
Hey, I respect it, man. We feel differently about this, but I definitely respect your opinion, and it's good to hear a
Same
different
here.
side because I think the Niners. Well, Kyle Shanahan, we know he's got an ego. I wonder if Kyle Shanahan would say, "Hey, I made this guy Debo." I mean, what was Debo before he came to the 49ers? I mean, I create these plays for him. I put him in situations to win. I mean, Kyle could be thinking, hey, I could get another Debo. And I'm not saying that's what he's saying, but one could argue, you had one elite season. His rookie year was good, but it wasn't Pro Bowl worthy. Um, some fans could think, maybe Debo's a one-hit wonder. I don't think that. I think he can definitely build on this season, but at the end of the day, I just want Debo to be with the Niners for years to come. And hopefully the 49ers brass and Debo will inch closer and closer week by week to an agreement that both parties compromise on. I think, in any relationship in general, you got to compromise. You can't always have it your way or the other person can always have it their way. So hopefully both parties will eventually, compromise. That's what I'm hoping
And
for.
history indicates, right, when it gets past the draft at least, that they
Right.
do end up compromising.
Right.
You're right. It takes time. That's a perfect statement you made because that's like, I know some people are like, oh, why do they wait till training camp? I don't think it's waiting. It's just that's how long it takes because it takes a while for both teams, both sides to discuss with their personal teams and then come back to the table with offers.
Right. And the 49ers have shown that they've done that with the Kittle and Warner contract. I believe those were signed in August. So
Right, right.
I would anticipate that's when those deals would get signed. We have NYCE in the building. What's good? NYCE says, hey, what's good, Jay? Hello, Rohan. We also have Carcast, a fellow 49er content creator in the building. What's good? Hopefully all is well for you, Carcast. Bay Area Throwbacks, man. He's got his own YouTube channel. He's got a lot of throwback apparel, man. Thanks for tuning in to the stream tonight. What's good? Um, I appreciate everyone tuning into the stream. Make sure you hit that thumbs up button. Let us know that you guys are enjoying the stream. Do you think? I think this is probably my last thing on Debo. Do you think the Jimmy Garoppolo contract, or he's still on the team, is affecting Debo signing a contract?
I can say yes, but not to the extent that people believe. Because I don't think Debo Samuel's cap hit is going to astronomically increase in 2022 with or without Garoppolo. The AJ Brown deal proved it. I think his went up less than $1 million. And
Wow.
so Samuel's contract, right? They negotiate these things in a way where they don't necessarily increase or escalate the cap hit in the first year, right? It'll come year after year. And to me, how I believe this contract is going to be structured, Samuel will either get a 4 or 5 year extension. Maybe it might be 4, given how Brown got a 4. And so let's just say 4 years. I'd assume 26 a year, maybe 25 a year, somewhere around there. I'd say 104. And then in terms of the guarantees, it'd probably be 62 in total, 65 maybe in total guarantees, which involves signing bonus, signing guaranteed at signing, and the injury guarantees, and then probably around 46 guaranteed at signing, which means that it's essentially he'll get a bit of an increase in his first year, and then the next 2 years will be worth around 22 million each in terms of fully guaranteed money. They'll fully guarantee 2 years, and then after that, it's either if he's not playing to expectation, you move on. If not, the likelihood is that you extend him, right? And so that's how I expect this deal to be done. But I don't necessarily believe that Garoppolo kind of impacts this deal because teams have shown you can have different ways to create cap space. However, obviously, if it is a matter of 800,000, is it worth it sometimes to restructure a deal just to involve Deebo Samuel's contract into your 2022 plans, like that extra 800,000 or whatever it may be? That might be the little question. And so since the 49ers are so down near the cap, I think what their draft picks, once they're all signed, it'll be less than 500,000. I think that maybe that's a little bit where the portion of Garoppolo's cap hit or Garoppolo's contract it does impact a little bit.
No, that makes sense. We've seen, the LA Rams, they continue to sign players, with they're able to finagle the cap. And that's what it
Right.
seems like the best teams are able to do. And the cap can be very confusing. There's different situations for guaranteed money, for signing bonus, what's your dead cap hit, what's your yearly cap, like all that can be different, and it'll affect your per cap per year dead cap charge. So it can be very, very confusing. But I appreciate your thoughts on Deebo Samuel and Jimmy G. But let's go into the draft. The 49ers first pick, they didn't have a first round pick, but their first pick in the second round was, Drake Jackson, a edge rusher out of USC. He played outside linebacker. He played edge rusher as well at USC. Do you anticipate that he'll start opposite of Nick Bosa? And do you think that was a good pick by the 49ers?
Yeah, so I'll start with the good pick question, then transition into the other part. I do think it was a great pick by the 49ers because I thought Drake Jackson wouldn't be there at 61, especially with how the board fell. Boye Mafe was the last passer rusher that I thought would go in front of Drake Jackson. He was selected at 40 by Seattle. So there's a 21 pick difference between where Boye Mafe was selected and Jackson. So then I thought, okay, where would David Ajabo go? Because obviously the injury really didn't give him a clear path to where he'd be selected. He goes 45, and still from 45 to 61, with the affinity that teams have for the pass rusher, and also the importance and the value that players had in this certain draft, I thought that Jackson would be gone between 45 and 61, and instead he fell to the 49ers at 61. Good pick for sure. He was underutilized, or he was like poorly utilized really at USC. Transitioned to a linebacker, had a bunch of weight fluctuation because of the coaching staff asks. He played his best as a freshman, 5.5 sacks, I believe. Total, I think, was 17 in 3 years, but I don't really care about the production. I care about the traits and how they'll translate to the NFL game. And I do think that Drake Jackson has those that traits, especially when working with Chris Kosarek. You can see him potentially line up on the outside or the interior. Now, about your point about do I think he'll start? I personally I don't really know and I don't really care because for me the starters on a defensive line aren't necessarily your top players. They're the guys who will play in base packages who are kind of there to defend the run, right? When you start, it's normally those sub packages where you have players to defend the run, and that's where maybe a guy like Samson Ebukam might play a little more. That's where maybe a Jordan Willis might play a little more, something like that. And so maybe you'll see different players start in that position. But here's what I'll say. Arden Key last year played in under 50% of defensive snaps in every single game last year, yet he was one of the most important contributors, probably the third most important contributor on the defensive line behind both Nick Bosa and Arik Armstead. And so when I look at Arden Key in that way, it shows me that you can be impactful without playing a majority of the snaps or without starting necessarily because you're a pass rush specialist. And that's what I expect from Drake Jackson in year one. And I do think that if he shows out in camp and can beat out some of the other guys that are currently at the position, he's got the potential to start getting a serious consideration for those pass rushing reps. But yeah, that's something we'll have to see. What about you?
Absolutely. Just got to say, what's good to 49er Faithful. Thanks for tuning in tonight. Kimberly and also David V. What's good? Appreciate you guys tuning in to the stream tonight. Yeah, I was surprised that he was there like you, but it's definitely a need for the 49ers. I feel John Lynch and Kyle Shanahan, they value the edge rushing position. Games are won and lost in the trenches, and why not continue to make that position a strength? And I think that's what they did with the Drake Jackson pick. And not only did they do that, but they have a young guy. He's only 21 years old. Chris Kosarek can mold him. We've seen Chris Kosarek do wonders with Kerry Hyder. We've
Right.
seen him do wonders with Arden Key. Arden Key was a bust with the Raiders, and he turned out his best season with the 49ers. And I think he got paid in Jacksonville, I believe, Arden Key. So I can't wait to see Drake Jackson, learn from Nick Bosa, learn from Chris Kosarek. And Drake Jackson will be under, team control for the next 3 to 4 years. So you look at all the other edge rushers on the team, they're all basically on 1-year deals. So I think it was imperative to get an edge rusher to line up opposite of Nick Bosa. And do I think he'll start? No, I don't think he'll start. I think Samson will probably get a bulk of the snaps. I could see Jordan Willis. There's also The gentleman we signed from the Colts, last name starts with the T.
Kimoko Trey, yeah.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, so he'll most likely be on
Could be,
pass
yeah.
rushing situations. I don't anticipate he'll be on, as you mentioned, base formation where we're trying to stop the run. I
Yeah.
think that's kind of like Samsung, but it's interesting. We mentioned Samsung. He's got, I think, $5 million left on his contract, the last year of his contract, but the 49ers can cut him and only owe him $1 million. So it'll be
Right.
interesting to see if Samsung will make the 53-man active roster. He could be a
Yeah.
late, August cut, depending upon
How the
hey,
training goes.
yeah, depending upon how the other guys do. But also I think Samsung, he kind of struggled the first half of last year, but I think he really picked up his production in the second half. So hopefully, that will continue. But he could be a cut option. But yeah, I like the Drake Jackson pick. And the defensive line is the strength of this team, and I think they're wise by keeping it a strength.
Yeah, that's a very good point you bring up there, especially real quick on the Ebucom part. I
Yeah.
tweeted out on March 9th, I remember, that the 49ers could save $6.25 million if they cut Ebucom. At the time, I wasn't necessarily saying that we should cut Ebucom, but I was saying I didn't think it would be the best for roster building if we held him on that big of a cap hit. I think the cap hit is $8.25 million for 2022. I didn't think it'd be that I didn't think it'd be the best scenario if we kept him on that cap hit. And I think that was only heightened by the draft and by our moves, because when we added Kimoko Ture. I know I'm not as high, but we added Kerry Hyder as well. We added not only Drake Jackson, but also Kalia Davis, who we'll talk about probably later in the draft. So we added a good amount of bodies to this defensive line on smaller contracts. So that does raise questions if other people beat out Ebucom in camp. Maybe he takes a pay cut. Maybe we cut him, something like that. But I don't know if he'll actually play this season on the cap hit that he's currently scheduled for. So yeah, great point there.
Yeah, I noticed that after the end of the season, I was just looking up, okay, well, who's a possible cut candidate? And I just noticed that Samsung's contract, 1 million of the 5 or 6 million is guaranteed. And I was like, well, okay, well, he could be a cut consideration. But I would be surprised if they did, unless he just kind of falls flat on his face in training camp. Then I could see them maybe doing that. But the 49ers last year, they kept 8 to 10 guys on that defensive line. 49ers love to get fresh guys to stop the run and go after the passer. So I think they will most likely keep him, but it's definitely something that to keep an eye on. That's for sure. John, in regards to Deebo Samuel, says Deebo wants his money sooner because he's a family man now. Hey, I respect it, man. I definitely respect it. I would never tell a player to take less money to stay with the 49ers. I know that professional football players have a short shelf life. Like, you look at all the major sports, the football players have the shortest shelf life out of basketball, baseball. So, I don't blame him for getting his money. I just hope that, the checks will be coming from the 49ers for years to come. NYC, I think the Deebo holdup was he wanted to wait to see what AJ and Metcalf are going to get because he wants to be the highest paid above them because they all share the same agent. He says new agent after this. That is an interesting wrinkle. I didn't know that until maybe about a few weeks ago that, AJ Brown, I even think the gentleman that just got traded to the Cardinals, the receiver, Hollywood,
Yeah,
he has the same agent, Deebo. Like that's great work for the agent, right? He's doing a great job. He's got all these wide receivers who are going to sign lucrative contract extensions. So it's a great problem to have for him, but that could be a reason for the holdup as well. What do you think? Do you think that could be a minor factor? Deebo wants to get more than AJ and Metcalf.
So that was actually one of the interesting things with the Deebo Samuel situation early on, because for me, when I'm looking at the Deebo Samuel situation, if he truly wanted to get traded by draft day and get paid, there is a certainty, or at least a high possibility, that he wasn't going to be the highest paid out of the four. So if that was the case, if he wants to be the highest paid out of him, Metcalf, AJ Brown, and McLaurin, then his best chance is to wait and get that deal from the 49ers, because then the other contracts would have came into place. Then there's the baseline for him to potentially get more. However, if he was traded by draft day, I don't think that necessarily would have happened. And so that's the part where it's up in limbo for me. The agent definitely has his hands tied in a little bit. because obviously all these players want to get the best deal possible.
Yeah.
Maybe some care about being paid the highest over others, but yeah, I mean, it's a hard task for him definitely to negotiate.
No, absolutely. And you bring up a great point. If Debo would have gotten traded, he would have gotten his contract extension already from that team.
Right.
I'm sure before a team would have traded for him, they would have already agreed in principle
Exactly.
to a contract before, trading for a player the caliber of Debo Samuel. But it'll be interesting to see, Debo and his contract from the 49ers. I can't wait to see how this plays out. But there's no doubt Debo is deserving of a lucrative contract extension. He's definitely earned it. We have Stan Hopkins in the building. What's good? Stan says, I think they are getting too comfortable realizing they can easily replace skill position players with UFDAs and discounts on low rounders. You got to lock in wide receiver eventually to gel in the offense. And I was saying this, Shanahan probably feels, well, I can get another Debo Samuel. This offense is great because of Shanahan's scheme and not necessarily the players. I can definitely see Shanahan thinking like that. But Debo's a generational talent. He's a Swiss Army knife. He can do a lot of things on the field. Not most players can't do those things. So, I think it's just the 49ers. They're negotiating. They're playing hardball. I just think this is what teams do. At least I think the good teams do it. I just don't think you capitulate to every player. You can't play every player whatever they want. It's just not going to happen like that. That's not how business works. So, we'll see how it plays out. He also mentions Derek Carr and Dak, for example, are decent quarterbacks, but the problem is they get their wide receivers swapped out every year. And also because they make a whole lot of money as well. So we've got Trey Lance on this rookie contract, so we should be able to add players on both sides of the ball. And obviously when he's up for that new extension, we won't be able to surround him. Then drafting will be even more important to get rookie guys around him that make less, that can still contribute. So got to talk about, so since we're with the draft, we selected the outside linebacker Drake Jackson out of USC. Now, with the third round pick, there's a lot of people talking about this. Why are we drafting a running back in the third round? I think you wrote an article on this.
Yeah.
But I did not read it because I wanted to hear, fresh from you today. So were you for or against the 49ers drafting TDP in the third round? Let me know your thoughts.
Right. So, I mean, I was at the 49ers draft party the time that this pick happened. And I mean, it was definitely an interesting selection. Very, very, it wasn't something that you'd expect, especially like not only with the value of the pick at 93, but also the player. TDP was projected maybe to go a round or two later. But then again, there were teams that were selecting running backs in that vicinity. I forget who it was. I know a running back went 5 or 6 picks later. So that could also be something 49ers don't want to lose out on. But to me, I was a little bit surprised. And so, but it's a little bit of a two-sided thing for me now that I've really thought about it and understood. And after rewatching how TDP plays in a way. So essentially, TDP is a very interesting running back. I think he was definitely harmed by the poor offensive line at LSU. Explosive. I think the explosive gear is there. However, obviously, it's sometimes shaded on film because LSU's offensive line obviously let the defense penetrate on run situations early, so he didn't have much room to run and really showcase his ability. Maybe he doesn't necessarily have the home run speed like a 4.3 whatever Mostert ran, but he ran a 4.48 that's still very respectable. He's a little bit of a bigger player than Elijah Mitchell, and he plays strong. I think that's important. He imposes his physicality on the defenders, and that's something that the 49ers have played with, that tenacity over the past year especially. That's kind of how they got to the team that they were playing as offensively last year. Now, obviously, to me, I feel this is a reach in terms of value because you had other players like Nick Cross or even Kirby Joseph, the safeties, on the board at 93. However, when I'm thinking about it, in a year, I don't think 49er fans are going to be as mad as they are right now because guess what? TDP has the best chance to contribute as a rookie, in my opinion, in 2022. And so I dropped this scenario on Grant Cohn's Collins show. I said if Elijah Mitchell was drafted in the third round last year, it would have been considered a reach because he was a fifth or sixth round player. But if Elijah Mitchell had the same season he had as a third round pick, no 49er fan is mad at that. They're going to be very happy that they got one of the best running backs in the class in the third round. And so that's how I'm viewing this TDP pick. Since he's going to get the chance to contribute, and he's showcased some of his abilities, especially his traits. You saw it at the combine with that 1.53 10-yard split. I do think that he's also got the chance to succeed in this system as a complement to Mitchell. And in a year when we're looking at the production that he potentially could have, I don't know if 49er fans are going to be as mad as they currently are about that pick.
Hey, great insight on that. When I first heard TDP's name and a running back for a third round pick, I was definitely thinking there were other needs we could have addressed. A lot of 49er fans were saying, hey, we need to get safety, but I just didn't think the 49ers would draft safety, in the first 3 to 4 rounds. I just didn't see it. It's a position that the 49ers haven't really done that under this regime. So I wasn't surprised we didn't get a safety, but like you said, man, we've been spoiled. Elijah Mitchell was a 6th-round pick last year, and he was our best running back. So for us to draft a running back in the 3rd round, I was definitely surprised. This is the 2nd year in back-to-back drafts we've drafted a running back in the 3rd round. Trey Sermon was the year prior, and he had a season that left a lot to be desired. He unfortunately got hurt real early, and it just seemed like Shanahan didn't really trust him. And that's part of the reason why Deebo Samuel was thrust into that option to play running back. And with this pick, I think it's told Deebo Samuel, hey, we're investing in our running back capital. We're not going to expect you to take on those carries that you did the previous season. For me, and like you mentioned, the guy is a physical back. He's a one-cut running back. And I think he could be a nice, lightning and thunder to Elijah Mitchell. And so if he contributes this year, he stays healthy, and Deebo doesn't have that many carries on him, I think it's a good draft pick. But as you mentioned, I think in the 5th round, Jerome Ford, running back, was taken. Ty Chandler
that's
was
what I was
taken.
saying.
Yeah, Kyron Williams. So we could have gotten a running back, no doubt, in the 5th round. So, that's why I agree with your assessment that, he was an overt draft. But if he can contribute and take less carries off of Deebo Samuel, then I think it's a win-win. Now, I just mentioned Trey Sermon. Do you think is there any chance Trey Sermon gets cut in training camp, in your eyes this year?
I don't believe so. It would be surprising to me if Trey Sermon got cut. The 49ers normally carry 4 running backs on the roster, and I do think that they're not going to move on from Sermon, especially because they owe him guaranteed money. It's not that much, obviously, but they owe him guaranteed money for the next 3 years. And also, he was an investment they made just a year ago. They probably want to see what he can potentially do with Anthony Lynn mentoring him over the next year. However, this move kind of indicates that he's going to be the 4th running back on the roster potentially in 2022, behind Mitchell, TDP, and Jeff Wilson Jr. At least that's how I see it currently. Obviously, Sermon could have an amazing training camp and establish somewhat of a role in this offense, but Sermon isn't necessarily a pass catcher. It's just that we've yet to see that position from him. He ran outside zone scheme at Ohio State, but his build might be indicative that he's more of a power runner in a way. So there is questions on how he'll be used in the scheme. But obviously, the 49ers use running backs extremely efficiently. And I mean, if there's a team that can develop running backs, it is the 49ers. So you don't necessarily want to give up on a talent that you thought so highly of just a year ago. So I don't believe that he's going to be the one to get cut. I think actually it's going to be JaMychal Hasty if they cut a running back.
Yeah, great points. I don't think there's any way he gets cut. Is if his role may be limited due to TDP or even Jeff Wilson Jr. But yeah, I don't think there's any way they would they would cut Trey Sermon. I mean, this is the same team that kept what's his name? His name is Jalen Hurd. This team kept Jalen Hurd for 3 years
without
playing in any regular season NFL game. So yeah, there's no way they're cutting Trey Sermon. But every running back on this roster last year got hurt at one point or another. And as you mentioned, they'll keep at least 4 running backs, and I think they'll keep at least 1 running back on the practice squad because, hey, running backs get hurt in today's NFL, and especially within Shanahan's system. Got to say, what's good to Redder? Thanks for tuning into the stream. We also have Tommy Huxley, David McNew. Thank you guys for supporting the stream tonight. David V gives us his thoughts on Samsung E. Bukem. He says Samsung's going to ball out. Just watch. I'm looking forward to it. I hope that's the case. John says 49ers stuck to their identity in the draft, overloading in D-line and running back room. I would agree with that.
Yeah.
I definitely would agree with that. And you said you think that Elijah Mitchell will be the starter, and it'll be between TDP, Jeff Wilson, and then Trey Sermon.
Yeah,
Your top four?
that's at least the order heading into training camp right now. It wouldn't surprise me if TDP ends up becoming the starter at some point, but I do think that this is how the order is at least playing into training camp.
Yeah, and if TDP becomes the starter, I don't think anyone would be complaining about that third round draft pick as you mentioned. Let's get into let's continue on with the draft. Which offensive draft pick do you think most likely will start or play meaningful snaps in the regular season this year?
So we had a couple, right? Offensively, the 49ers tried to build around Trey Lance a little more. TDP was the one we talked about right now. We have Danny Gray as well. And then we drafted two offensive linemen alongside a quarterback, Spencer Burford in the fourth round, Nick Zakej, I think, in the sixth round out of Fordham. And then you have Brock Purdy in the seventh round. Now, when we look at it, I think in terms of who's got the shot competing for a starting job, or at least meaningful, I think it's the guy we just mentioned in TDP. Because when you look at Danny Gray, right, I think he is a talented wide receiver, needs to be a little more polished as a route runner and play to his game speed a little more when he's coming out of breaks and coming out of running routes rather than being a pure deep burner. But I think he'll get opportunity. It's just that we have such a crowded room already with Samuel, Ayuk, Jawan Jennings, who's got a spot in this offense, especially with his run blocking ability. Then we also have Ray McLeod. So it's going to be kind of a battle between McLeod and Gray for that fourth spot. And McLeod, at least, obviously he has the NFL experience. So I'd probably position Danny Gray as number 5 on the depth chart for wide receivers heading into training. And for Burford and Zakej, I think Burford is probably a backup for year one. I think he has to put on a little more weight, probably as a guard, but he could potentially compete to start at right guard. I think personally Zakej is a little more pro ready. I'd be interested to see if he's thrown in the center role or at least compete in the center role alongside Donovan West and Jason Poe if Alec Mack retires. But I think at this point, we don't necessarily know. But if Mac doesn't retire, then obviously I think Zakej is also relegated to a bench role for 2022. So to me, yeah, I do think that it is TDP. What about you?
TDP will be no surprise because the amount of running backs we use throughout the season. There's no doubt he's going to play some meaningful snaps if he's healthy and he's contributing. But I would say Danny Gray. He brings the element to this offense we haven't really seen. I mean,
That's true.
I don't know. Yeah, I don't know about you, but Travis Benjamin didn't really do it for me as a speed guy at the wide receiver position. He left a little bit to be desired. We haven't really had a speed guy since Marquise Goodwin. Danny Gray, though, he's 6'2", 199, multiple sport athlete. He's got the 4.3, 340 speed. He can definitely stretch the field. And I think Trey Lance can target him downfield, and that's something that this offense has been missing. Jimmy Garoppolo, whatever it is, whether it's Jimmy wasn't comfortable throwing the ball deep, whether Shanahan didn't call those types of plays, but the offense didn't really it wasn't really a vertical offense. It was more horizontal. It was more, the defense had to guard only the line of scrimmage to about 10 yards back because Jimmy wouldn't throw the ball. With Trey Lance under center, I think this offense will change and will be better, and I think Danny Gray can definitely help in that ability. Now, can Danny Gray block? At Shanahan asked his wide receivers to block in the running game. Is something that's not optional. It's something you have to do. So I think Danny Gray will definitely have to get better, in that aspect. But I'm going out on a limb, and I'm going to say Donovan West will play the most meaningful snaps this year, especially if Alex Mack retires. And I think Donovan West could maybe compete for a guard position. And also he has experience at center at Arizona State University. So I think I like Donovan West. And and I think he could compete at one of those two spots. I know Aaron Banks is kind of the odds-on favorite to win that left guard spot, but we brought, as you mentioned, we brought in a lot of offensive linemen in the draft and in UDFA, so nothing will be given to Aaron Banks. That's for sure. He's going to have to earn that left guard spot, even though he was a second-round pick last year. But I'm going to go out on a limb. I'm going to say Donovan West will either get a right guard spot, or potentially he could win that center spot. I know Daniel Brunskill would be the odds-on favorite to get that center spot, especially if Alex Mack retires. But I'm gonna go out on a limb and I'm gonna go with Donovan West. I mean, this guy should have been drafted. This guy should have been a third or fourth round draft pick, and the fact that the Niners got him as a UDFA, that's incredible value. Like that's like winning the lottery right there. So let's switch to the other side of the ball. Which defensive draft pick do you think will get the most meaningful snaps this year?
Right. So we obviously had Drake Jackson, right? He was selected at 61 in the second round. That's the main clear choice. Other draft picks that we had: fifth round cornerback Samuel Womack, probably projected to be a slot cornerback in the NFL. And then we also had two sixth round selections in Kalia Davis and Tariq Castro Fields. Now, for me, I gave my piece on Jackson. I think he does have the potential to at least cause some commotion in that room, despite it being so deep, given his unique set of talents, and also that he's finally going to be playing the true edge position, and so he'll be able to showcase it. He's back to his playing weight of 275. Now, Womack, I think he'll probably be in consideration at slot cornerback. I don't necessarily think he'll win the job. We have Diamondo Lenore, and if Jason Verrett can stay healthy, I think that he should at least compete to stay or to compete to play in the slot. He obviously is around 5'10", 180, 175, so he's got the build of a slot cornerback, although he can obviously kick out to outside. To be honest, I don't know if Womack is making the 53 or is going to be on the practice squad for this year, just given the amount of depth that we have. But, I mean, we've seen that a number of players can play in the slot for the 49ers. And one thing that Womack kind of has to improve on, he's got good ball skills, I think, coming out of Toledo, has to a little bit improve as a physical guy and as a tackler. Played well in press man, but the 49ers love those tackling guys and guys that are good in run defense at the slot position, like they've had with K'Wan Williams. Although Womack does provide a little bit of a intrigue with his speed as a blitzer, and that's what something else the 49ers do like at that slot corner position. The other two guys were my two favorite defensive picks in terms of value. Them two and Jackson were my three favorite value picks. I think Davis might not necessarily have a big role in year one given the injury, but he obviously probably could have gone drafted higher. Same with Tariq Castro Fields. And I'll be interested to see where Castro Fields at least slots up for year one. I think he projects best as an outside corner, but I think he could potentially compete to start alongside Jimmy Ward at the safety position in year one. But overall, I do think that Jackson has the clearest path to the most amount of reps on the defensive side. How about you?
Yeah, that is the most obvious choice, Jackson. But other than him, I don't see any defensive draft pick getting meaningful snaps. I look at this 49ers defense, and I think it's pretty loaded. I think the starters are pretty much set, opposite of Jimmy Ward at the strong safety position. But I think every other position I think is pretty much set. I think Jackson definitely will get meaningful snaps. And you mentioned the Khalil Davis, the 6th round pick. He suffered the torn ACL, so as you mentioned, he won't be a factor really in year one. But I think he could be, dare I say, DJ Jones 2.0. They have a similar build. They both were drafted in day 3 of their respective drafts, and it'll be interesting to see how he progresses year 2. With this defensive front. Samuel Womack, you mentioned him. I don't anticipate he'll start, but he does bring great speed to this defense. And, I think something that stood out to me about Samuel Womack was he led the MAC conference in passes defended in multiple years, every year he was in school. So that's definitely something that stood out to me. But, I don't see any other defender really making a huge impact. But we'll see, because this will be, I think there's 85 to 90 players already signed. There's going to be a lot of competition in a lot of areas, not for necessarily starting roles, but like depth roles. And it'll be interesting to see what happens in the secondary, what happens on the defensive line. But I think every other position is pretty much set. But I do like our draft overall. That's for sure. I do like the draft overall.
Got
Um,
it. Got it.
Gotta say, what's good to Niner Sickness. Thanks for tuning in to the stream. And I like what Niner Sickness said. He says, Happy Mother's Day to all the 49er moms. Absolutely. You all deserve it. We have Cook Smoke Sports in the building. What's good? Appreciate you tuning into the stream, man. How is your Sunday night going? I agree with Tommy here. He says Mitchell was a steal in the 6th round. I completely agree with that. And that's why a lot of people were confused with the 3rd round selection of TDP. But hey, if he's a contributor, it won't even matter. Like it won't matter when he was selected. As long as he's able to contribute to the team, man, it won't even matter. But speaking of the draft, I thought it'd be interesting to take a quick moment to think about what the other teams in the NFC West division did in the draft: the Rams, the Cardinals, and Seahawks. I'll start off first with Seattle. Obviously, they traded away the best player of their franchise, Russell Wilson, to the Denver Broncos, and it looked on the outside looking in, it looked like they were trying to rebuild. But
Right.
They drafted 2 offensive linemen early in the draft to address their offensive line. The player that stood out to me was Boye Mafe. I was real big on Boye Mafe. I wanted the 49ers to draft him, and now we're going to have to go up against Boye Mafe 2 times a season. For his sake, he should line up opposite of Mike McGlinchey and not Trent Williams, but we'll see how that plays out. But and they also got running back Kenneth Walker, who some said was probably the best running back coming out of the draft. And now you have Kenneth Walker, Carson, and Penny. You have a 3-headed monster rushing attack. So I think the Seahawks had a pretty solid draft. They addressed several areas on the team. Did the Seahawks, Rams, or Cardinals, did any of their drafts stand out to you? Who do you think had the best draft?
Yeah.
Besides
So 2 of those drafts really stood out to me. Seattle was definitely one of them. I thought they drafted pretty well, which normally isn't really indicative of them in the early rounds, especially.
Right.
They normally have been known to reach on players. We've seen a couple of busts coming out of Seattle. Most recently, LJ Collier, the defensive tackle they selected 29th overall. I think they had a pretty good selection with Jordan Brooks, but he was also considered a reach on draft night. So they're known to reach, but they changed their MO. Obviously, the year Russell Wilson gets out of Seattle, they finally draft offensive linemen. Don't take 1, but 2. They got Charles Cross with the 9th overall pick, Abraham Lucas in the 3rd round, I believe. And both were pretty solid selections. Cross probably starts day 1, and Lucas probably has the potential to eclipse or take over the spot that Dwayne Brown left in free agency, because I don't think he's no longer with the team. So he could potentially be a day 1 starter too, if not a future starter for them. Walker obviously provides you some insurance should Carson retire following his neck issue. And so he and Penny are there together. And then Boye Mafe is a pretty solid projection of a pass rusher that you could get. So overall, pretty solid draft. Drafted 2 solid defensive backs as well, and Kobe Bryant, Tariq Woolen. Woolen obviously a lot more projection than what he currently is, with those amazing traits, 6'4", 205, but ran pretty well at the combine. I believe it was like a 4.26, somewhere around there. So the traits are obviously there. And in the 5th round, despite maybe the lack of pure talent at the moment, I think it's worth a flyer in the 5th round. Kobe Bryant, another bigger size corner, 6'2", around 185. So yeah, 2 potential players that you could have in that cornerback room after losing DJ Reed in the offseason. I thought that was a nice draft by them. The other one I want to throw out there was Arizona. I thought even after trading Hollywood Brown, they had a pretty solid draft. Hollywood Brown was essentially their 1st round pick, but they had Trey McBride. I forget a pick number. I think it was like 56 or 57, somewhere around there. Trey McBride in the 2nd round was a pretty solid selection to get opposite of Zach Ertz, just obviously helping Kyler Murray out, continue to build around him. But their next 2 picks are what really stood out to me: Cameron Thomas and Myjai Sanders in the 3rd round. That's your potential 2 guys opposite of J.J. Watt for the future. Thomas has the potential to slide inside on pass rushing downs, pretty solid run defender, while Myjai Sanders is a pure pass rush specialist who should be able to slide both inside and out. He played a good amount of inside at Cincinnati when he was being poorly utilized, and so I think he could slide inside or out. You have two pretty solid options there. And then I think they drafted Jesse Luketa with one of their very late selections. I think he's a good projection player out of Penn State, a linebacker in a way that can also rush a little bit as well. So I thought that was a solid pick. And I'm pretty sure they had a couple of offensive linemen as well. Marquise Hayes, I think, was one of their later rounds. Oklahoma, pretty solid player. And then Letitia Smith, two development guys over there. Smith out of Virginia Tech. Those are my two favorites in the NFC West. And I mean, knowingly so, given that they probably had higher picks, given that they selected both ahead of the 49ers and the Rams.
Yeah, and you mentioned Jesse Luketa, the linebacker they got. I think that was a 7th round pick. He was projected to go in the 4th round. Some would say, though, that you didn't need to select a linebacker. You already have a few there. And I think you have a few top 10 first-round picks. I think in back-to-back years, I think they got linebackers. So
don't worry, Luketa's going to play more than Zayvon Collins did last year.
Wow, and it's crazy because he's a 7th round pick.
They just keep drafting him.
Right. They keep drafting linebackers, and I think the Trey McBride move, some would say that they could have gotten, maybe an offensive lineman earlier because they need to protect Kyler. But you match up Trey McBride with Ertz and Mac Williams, it seems like they're definitely going offense, and especially with DeAndre Hopkins being suspended the first 6 weeks, they're going to need to
too. So that definitely adds to that intrigue because you might have McBride play out of the slot, essentially take some off of Metcalf or some not Metcalf. What do you call him? Hollywood Brown out there.
Yep. And you mentioned, the edge rushers they got in back-to-back picks and Cam Thomas and Myjai Sanders. Man, those are 2 picks, and you team up with J.J. Watt, as you mentioned, and the 49ers have to go up against those guys, Boye Mafe in Seattle, Aaron Donald, and Leonard Floyd in L.A. Man, this offensive line is definitely going to have to come together and do their best against these guys because they have a lot of talent going forward in all 3 NFC West teams along their defensive line. So, those 2 drafts stood out to me, the Cardinals and the Seahawks. And you mentioned the Seahawks earlier. Like, they've whiffed on their draft picks. Like, ever since the Legion of Boom, they haven't really been able to get any pillars. They haven't been able to really draft any pillars in the draft. And one could argue that, hey, they're drafting at the back end of the first round in a lot of years because of, Russell Wilson being there and they're always in the playoffs. But even if you look at the later rounds, they just really haven't been able to have success with their draft. And that's something that you got to point to Pete Carroll and John Schneider up there in Seattle. But it'll be interesting to see how their season plays out, especially if they're thinking about starting Geno Smith at quarterback. What do you think? Just top of your head, what do you think they should do at quarterback? Should they try to get Baker, or what do you think? Or stick with Geno?
Yeah, I mean, if I'm Seattle, like I understand the NFL is a winning league, right? I totally understand that, but at least at this point, it just seems that Pete Carroll's job in a way is safe. And that it's going to be his choice to retire before I don't think he'll get fired. Maybe John Schneider, their GM, might get fired, but I think Pete Carroll at least is in a position where he won't get fired until he retires. And for me, I think the best way for him to get to contention again is essentially take this year with your quarterbacks, have a little bit of a losing season, and then be in position to select one of the top 2 quarterbacks in next year's draft, where the talent, at least it's not even the top 2, but really the talent at the quarterback market, be it Stroud, Bryce Young, or maybe even Will Levis. And then I'm forgetting another guy, but there's a pretty good quarterback also, another one, like a good amount of top quarterbacks there. I think that they should definitely take one of those. But if they're looking to compete, I don't think you trade for Baker Mayfield in his contract, nor do I think you should trade for Garoppolo in his contract. See which one ends up getting bought out and then sign one of those guys. But at the moment, it doesn't really look like a promising quarterback room over there in Seattle for sure.
Hey man, I would agree. In regards to Baker, I don't think that, or I just say in regards to Jimmy, I don't think the Niners would trade Jimmy to Seattle. I just don't see that happening. But in regards to Baker, I mean, you might be able to only trade maybe a 7th round pick for Baker and maybe have the Browns eat like 15 or 16 mil of the salary. I mean, I know the Browns are desperate. There's no way the Cleveland Browns want Baker Mayfield in the locker room in training camp. I just don't see that being, a positive situation for anyone involved. But hey, we'll see what happens. Hey, I don't mind seeing Geno Smith or Drew Lock twice a year. I don't mind that at all. But what'd you think about the 49ers re-signing cornerback Jason Verrett? What are your quick thoughts on that?
Yeah, so I mean, earlier in this offseason, I actually didn't think the 49ers would do the move. I thought that re-signing Dante Johnson over Jason Verrett would have been smarter, but it doesn't hurt when it's a training camp body. And I think you just want to see gauge how Verrett plays.
Right.
Like personally, obviously, it's a complete unknown whether he makes the roster given how he moves in training camp. But it's nice to see them obviously give him another opportunity. I love the player. I love the character as well. And it was so tough for me to see him tear that ACL in week 1 last week in garbage time. So it's nice to see them, extending another courtesy to a player that they continue to believe in. Like I said earlier, I do believe that if he can move at the way that he's moved in the past a little bit, he's in contention to start in the slot. Obviously, John Lynch said it's an open competition there. There's going to be a ton of opportunity for certain players to compete in the slot, and I think Verrett should be one of those guys, with the outside guys being Mosley and obviously Charvarius Ward, who we signed this offseason. So solid signing. I don't know necessarily if he makes the 53, but if he doesn't, then you can keep him as a veteran on the practice squad, and if not, then or if he does make the roster, then I'd like to see him at least compete to start in the slot.
Yeah, I like the signing. Jason Verrett's a Bay Area kid. He's out from Fairfield. This is a low risk, high reward signing. It's a 1-year vet minimum contract for the 49ers. I think it depends on how Jason Verrett, how his body recovers. I believe he tore his ACL before, and the Niners signed him. I think that was in the 2019 season, and it kind of took him 2 years to kind of really get his feet under him and really be able to make the most out of his opportunity. So, hey, let's see how he is in training camp. There's a lot of competition out there in the secondary. We've got, guys that we drafted last year, Demo Lenore, Ambry Thomas, and also the UDFAs we brought in this year and the draft picks we have this year. So ton of talent and a ton of competition in the secondary. And I love to say, iron sharpens iron, and I think it brings out the best in everyone involved. I think that's what competition is all about. So, and I think if Verrett makes the squad, he can help the young guys. The rookies we have, and also the second year guys we have. So, I think it's a win-win. So, but we've reached that hour mark. It has flown by, man. I'm glad we were able to link up, Rohan. I appreciate your insights on a lot of the topics we had here tonight. For those that don't know you, Rohan, where can they find you? Let the people know where they can find you on social media and what to expect from your 2 YouTube channels.
Yeah, so for those of you that don't know me, I cover the 49ers for 49ers Webzone, one of the 49ers news media outlets out here in the Bay Area. They're of USA Today. So be sure to check out my work there, try and post daily content in a way to keep you guys updated on the 49ers post-draft, especially with Debo and all the new news in a way. Additionally, I host my podcast with Marco Martinez, my co-host, and I'm on a bunch of different guest shows like today with my guy Jay. So be sure to check me out there. Just trying to give out some 49ers insight and take some back. And so, yeah, Jay, thank you so much for having me on. It's been a pleasure getting to know you and obviously getting to be on this show with you. And to the chat, thank you guys for staying buzzing this entire time. Love talking with all of you guys. And be sure to hit me up on Twitter at Rohan Chakrov. I know Jay said earlier that the link is in the description. Go ahead, hit that up, and you can shoot me a DM if you want.
Hey, absolutely, man. It's been a pleasure. I can't wait to link up again, closer to when the season starts. And I'm looking forward to that. I'm glad we were able to finally link up because, like I said before, I seen you on First Take, seen you on Larry Krueger. So it was cool to meet you in person via YouTube, via Zoom. So, man, I appreciate it. And, man, you have a good rest of your week, man. And we will be in touch, man. I appreciate you for tuning in, or I should say I appreciate you for coming on tonight.
Thank you.
Absolutely, man. All right, you take it easy. Have a good night. All right, man. So that was Rohan. Make sure you check him out on all his social media links. The links are in the description of this video, man. Very knowledgeable guy. I enjoyed his insight, and I'm looking forward to us collabing again on some 49er content. Tommy Huxley says if Sermon doesn't have a good season, he is a bust, plain and simple, point blank. If he has a second season where he's healthy the entire year, but he can't get any carries, he can't get on the field, then, hey, man, I would kind of have to agree with you. Niner sickness coming in with some heat. He said Javon Kinlaw will ball out, mark my words. That's all 49ers are hoping for at this point. He had the knee surgery, and he said he's this is the healthiest he's been in a while. So hopefully, Javon Kinlaw and Armstead inside wrecking havoc along an offensive line. That's all we want. David says, what you fellas think of the O-line competition that's coming up should be fire. I completely agree with you, David. There's going to be at least 10 to 15 guys going at it every day in training camp. And outside of, Trent Williams, I think every position is up for grabs, especially if Alex Mack retires. So I think McGlinchey is the odds-on favorite to get that right tackle spot, but I don't think it's necessarily guaranteed. But I think a lot of positions are up, especially on the interior of the offensive line. Let's see. We got Kelts Chronicles in the building. Yay! What's good? Appreciate you coming through, Kelts. He says we're going to have some good players not make the team. That's how you know we Super Bowl bound, Brody. Hey, man, and I think that's why we have that practice squad. We can put, anywhere between 10 to 13 players on the practice squad, and we can keep those players because we know injuries will happen, and it's important to have depth at a lot of positions. NYCE, man, I completely agree with you. Verrett is that veteran corner that we needed last year to get us to the Super Bowl like Sherman was that year in 2019. I like Verrett, and I hope he can be that player he was in 22. Love the DB room. I completely agree. And if we don't bring Jaquiski Tart back, it'll be interesting to see who will turn out to be that starting strong safety opposite of Jimmy Ward. Appreciate the kind words, NYCE. He says, great show, Jay. Thank you for the energy and great info. Have a great week, man. Same to you. Tommy says, I look to see the Niners run defense number one in the league. Man, I can definitely see that. Absolutely see that. Huge shout out to everyone who contributed to the stream today, everyone who was in the chat, and everyone who donated to the channel today, 49ers First Takes and Blue True. Huge shout out to you guys. And thanks for joining me tonight on a Sunday night. Happy Mother's Day to all the wonderful mothers out there. Before you head out, make sure you hit that thumbs up button if you haven't. Huge shout out if you watched on intheBay Facebook, YouTube, and Twitter. So I will see you guys in the next live stream. Most likely at the latest, I will be doing one next Sunday night. Let's see. We got Job in here. What's good? Thanks for tuning into the stream, man. Job is a Colts fan. He says, how are you doing? Both teams are looking good. I would agree with that. NYCE says only one spot is a lock on the offensive line, and that's for the big silver back. I completely agree with you, NYCE. Completely agree with you. Hey, CarCast. Hey, man, I got to respect the brother's time. I got to respect my time, CarCast. So Rohan was on for the first hour of the show. Fire content, man. Rohan is a dope dude. Very knowledgeable about the 49ers. Can't wait to have him back on. But huge shout out to you, CarCast. Thanks for coming back into the stream. But everyone have a great rest of your night. Thanks for watching your boy, Jay in the Bay. I will see you guys in the next one. Go Niners.